This is not going to work, is it? That's better. This is what happens when you try to multitask. Hello, my name's Lizzie. I'm Anglican in, where are we? Just under 5 weeks' time I'm going to be moving into a convent ready to become a postulant. If you don't mind, I'm going to talk to you while walking to the cinema because basically I've spent the whole day sorting out my flat and I really need a change of scenery, and one of the things I came across while going through all my drawers and everything were some gift vouchers for an independent little cinema that's not very far from where I live, and of the few films they're showing in the weeks before I leave Leicester, the one I'm most interested in this evening is the only time I can get to it, so I'm gonna go on down there, which is why I'm a bit dishevelled because I literally had the quickest shower ever, so I could run there to get there on time. So I'm going to talk to you while walking there.
I will hold your people in my heart.
This is the road I live in, and the cinema I'm going to is just kind of beyond this blue skyscraper, like 10 minutes walk or so, so not very far. And by the way, just in front of that skyscraper, is this kind of the building, the brick-ish buildings lower down. That's Leicester train station anyway, just at the bottom of this road. While we're at the bottom of my road, there's a hostel, which is why the park I overlook can often get quite noisy because some of the people that live in the hostel use the park as their garden, which is fair enough. And there's my nearest mosque as well. The reason I'm making this video is just the last few days several people have asked me how long the nun training is, and someone else was asking me if I have to take exams, and I guess because people are very familiar with the setup of you choose a particular profession, and you might, say you want to be a social worker, then you would then do the necessary degree or qualifications to do that, and once you've done that training or that degree, then you're qualified to become that social worker in that example. But it's very different, but becoming a nun is very different from that setup, and I think some of the people that have been asking me thought it was very similar to when you train to be a priest or a minister, but again, when you're training to be a priest or a minister, you might have to do a particular theology degree, and you would have a set number of years of they would call it training, although there's discernment involved as to whether God wants you to do that training and then go on, but you still would talk about training, and then you kind of are then qualified to be a minister or a priest after a set number of years of training and formation. Whereas becoming a nun, it's a very different process. You don't have to have a degree to go into religious life, and there isn't any sort of studying. There isn't a set degree involved. There is studying, but from what I understand, that's more studying the rule and just studying about religious life, and it's not as much studying as a full-time university student or anything like that. I think when I spoke to a postulant, I think she was doing 2 hours a day of studying of some description, and I don't think there are any exams involved. I think that the main assessment is just you living within the community in a way that's an ongoing assessment, that's a way for the community to work out if they feel it is right for you. But the main language that nuns will be using is of discernment, and their main question is this where God wants you? And you're trying to, you living within the convent or within the community, you're trying to discern, is this where God wants me, and is this where I seem to fit? And the community is also praying and trying to discern if it's right for you. So it's much more about how both sides feel after several years of praying and trying to discern whether it's right for you, than it is about reaching a stage where you become qualified. In terms of how long it takes, I've been given I'm no expert on this at all. I'm just sharing what I'm learning as I go on. I've been given the timings for the community that I'm looking at joining, so it might be different with different communities or orders. But where I'm going, you're a postulant. Well, you're a postulant for 6 months, but so you always start by being a postulant, and that might vary in length depending on where you're going. So you're a postulant, and then at the end of your period of being a postulant, and that's usually a set period of this many months, if you feel it's right to go ahead and the community feels it's right, then you're clothed as a novice, and that's when you are given, well, that's when you, in this community that I'm looking at, that's when you would start to wear a habit, and it's when you become a novice that you start being called sister. So already you're going to start like looking and sounding like a nun, as in your title sounds like you already are a nun. But even once you're clothed as a novice, from what I understand, there's still a period of time you've got to wait before you can make your first profession or take your first vows. And where I'm going, if I remember correctly, it's 2 years as a novice before you can make your first profession, take your first vows. And those first vows will be for a set number of years, like 2 or 3, and it's you then, the next stage after taking your first vows or first profession would be to make your life profession. But I'm pretty sure that you've got to have done a minimum of 3 years under first vows or temporary vows before you can make your life profession. But at the same time, you can wait longer than 3 years if you still need more time to before you feel ready to make that decision. You might just feel like you need to try it out for another year yet, or another couple of years yet, before going on. So I think the minimum, the quickest you could take your final vows or make your full profession would be, by my reckoning, like 5.5 years after moving in. Well, this is certainly the case of the community I'm looking at, after moving into the convent, but or into the religious community. But yeah, there don't seem to be set timings, because it's really not something you want to rush. It's something you want to be sure that it is what you feel God wants for you, and the community feels it's right too. So to recap, you're a postulant for however long, then you're a novice for maybe like a couple of years, then you would make your first vows, then you might renew those first vows every year until you feel ready to make life profession. But I think there might be a maximum as well, like 6 years or so, that you could do that, and then you really got to make your decision. Are you going to make a life profession, or have you just decided it's not the right community for you, in which case you leave the community? So that there are no, in that respect, it's very different from even training to be a minister, where there are set, you do 3 years training or 2 years training. This is longer, and it's much more flexible, because God's not, discernment isn't that simple. God doesn't take us on simple journeys sometimes, and sometimes discernment isn't always clear, and it takes time to discern. So it's very, very flexible and very much focused on prayer. So I'm just trying to add a last bit in the end of the cafe. I just thought I should add that, but when you make this, what is the correct phrase? I keep saying life profession, it's not, it's full profession or final vows or something like that. But when you make that final profession, that's not the moment that you become a qualified nun, because qualification isn't part of the language that's used. It's about at what point are you ready? Do you feel ready to make a lifelong commitment to religious life into this particular community? So it's the closest thing to it is like on a wedding day, and you're saying on that day, I'm committing to this for the rest of my life. And up till now, usually like dating or in religious life terms, you kind of making temporary vows in the process. This is a day where I've got to the point that I feel ready to make a commitment for life. So that's the kind of culmination of this whole process.